Hello and welcome. As you see this particular web page, it is only HTML. There is no CSS attached. So from this end, we are going to be using this web page to explain our CSS. We'll be adding some CSS rules to this particular web page, and we'll see how it's going to play out. Like I said, this particular chapter has to do with color. Okay, so in this color, you're going to talk about foreground color and background color. But before that, let me show you the code that produces this particular web page, so that you can see that only HTML. There's no CSS code. As you see, this is the same code we use in our HTML lessons. The only thing I've done is, because I'm going to use an external CSS, I have written the link, okay, to the file, and this is my CSS file. That's it here, opened. You see it's empty, so I'm going to begin writing the CSS rules for this web page. Okay, so you can see here it is empty. The file is located in the same folder, so I was able to link it on my HTML page. You can see here HTML. This is the CSS. This is empty. This has some content. So what I've done is I've linked this page, which I'm going to start building in a short while, so you can easily follow. So what you do is you bring the link, because you are using an external CSS, and we explain that external CSS is not on the same web page. You bring the hyperlink reference. We indicate the name or the source of the file. The type of file is test/CSS, and then we also establish a relationship, and the value of the relationship is what? Is style sheet. Alright, so I would like to add some codes on my CSS. Okay, so straight, I have some codes copied. Okay, so this is the rule I want to add for now to explain foreground color. Okay, you can see applying a rule to the body, the entire body. I said the entire body should have a property of font family, and the value of the font family is Arial. Another is background color, that is for the entire body of the web page, and it should be RGB. I'm going to explain what RGB is in my slides shortly. Let me bring out my slides. So as you can see, color is what we are discussing. Color. When we say color, we are going to explain how to specify colors, whether through RGB, HSL, HSLA, or we are going to use color names by itself. We are also going to explain terminologies, and then we're going to explain what contrast means. So we explain contrast, hue, saturation. Okay, those are some of the terminologies that are what associated with what? With color. We're also going to explain background color, okay, and foreground color. Okay, background and foreground color. When we say foreground color, okay, it is a property, or color is a property that allows you to specify the color of text inside an element. So we want to give a particular element a particular color. Okay, you can also specify any color in CSS in 3 different ways. Mind you, the spelling of color is COLOR, not COLOUR. We are using the American spelling of color and not the British, so be mindful of the spelling of color. Okay, and then throughout our lessons is going to be color. You can see foreground color, COLOR. 3 different ways color can be what? Can be specified. One is the RGB. I told you the RGB stands for red, green, and blue. Okay, red, green, and blue. color experts explain that almost every color can be formed by using an amount of red, an amount of green, and an amount of blue put together. Okay, it expresses the number of red or how much green and how much blue a particular color is made up of. So if we check this example simply means red has an amount of 100, green an amount of 100, and then blue has an amount of 90. These three colors put together will give you a particular one color to use. So you can actually specify the color given to an element by using the RGB. Another way of expressing color is using the hex code. The hex code is a 6-digit code that represents an amount of red, an amount of green, and an amount of blue. Okay, but in the hex code, it is preceded by a hash, and it is usually a 6-digit code that comes after the hash. So together with the hash, we have, let's say, 7. Okay, the hash plus 6-digit code, that makes the hex code. We can also specify a color, which is the third way of specifying, which is by using the original color name. There are about 147 predefined color names that are recognized by browsers. For example, green, red, cyan, okay, dark cyan, blue, black. You see, there are colors that are specified. 147 different colors. You can do research and then actually see the various color names. So I'm going to my text editor. I'm going to express foreground color using the RGB, using the hex code, and using the color names together. Okay, so that I will explain how to use any of them. You look for the best that suits you, that's easier for you, and then you can use it to specify color. Now, as you see the codes here or the CSS rules here, this first line has to do with the entire body of the web page, which is the entire visual or the graphical area of the web page, and I'm going to give it a straight rule of with the property font family, and it's going to take a value of Arial. And also come to the background color, which is the entire background. I'm going to give it an RGB color, which is 247 red, 224 green, and 210 blue. It's going to form a color like a bright gray color, or we call a bright ash color. Then I now come to the heading, H1, first level heading. I'll give it a color of green. In this case, I'm giving it a straight color name, green. Straight color name, green. Okay, and this green is 0 red, 128 green, and 0 blue. Okay, and 0 blue. This is a hash code. I told you the hash code starts with a pound, okay, or a hash. It has 6 digits behind it, and this is a red. Okay, this is a red color. So as you can see, it's red here. And I'm also going to give all my paragraphs black, and black is 0 red, 0 green, and 0 blue. I'm going to save this file, my CSS file, and now because it is already linked to my HTML document, I do not have to do anything to the HTML. I'll just have to go to my web page and refresh. Now you see all what I gave is working. I gave it a lighter gray for the entire body. I give my text color or my paragraphs black, which you can see. I give level 1 heading green color, and I give level 2 heading a red color. So everything is working just as I want it to work. So this is what specifying colors using the RGB, the hex code, and the color name. I've used all three in here. The next one is going to be background color. Okay, background color. This is what a foreground color. Now when you go to background color, okay, CSS treats every HTML element as if it appears in a box, like I told you, an invisible box around each element, and the background color property sets the color of the background for that box. Okay, so when I apply it, you are going to understand it more. You are going to see my background color covering the entire element I've applied. Okay, you can also choose any background color in the same way we choose the foreground color. So it can be in the form of the RGB, is the red, green, blue. You can also use the hex code, which is the 6-digit code preceded by hash, or you can use one of the predefined color names. Okay, if you do not specify a background color, then the background color is transparent. Okay, by default most browser windows will have a white background. So ordinarily, if you don't specify any particular color, it will give it a background color of white. But browser users can set a background color, and you want to be specific. I want the background color of my heading should be this or should be that. Remember, when you are doing colors too, you have to be sensitive, so that you know that, oh, the background color and the foreground color actually match. Okay, don't use a color, background color, and then the foreground color as the same. In this case, the text will not be legible for reading. I'm going to explain what color is, understanding color the more. Okay, and then, but before that, I want to explain background color using our web page. So I'll go onto my text editor once more and explain how to specify background colors. So we are currently on our text editor. I want to give the entire body a background color of 200 red, 200 green, and 200 blue. It's going to give me a color just like a gray color. Okay, and then I'm going to specify using a color name of dark cyan, a color name, and this hex code, which is something like a pink, and a background color of white for all my paragraphs. Let me save this. Control S. Let me refresh and see what is going to happen. Now this is what is happening. I'm giving the background color for all my paragraphs as white. Okay, that's the background color. You see, it is putting them as if they are in a box. They are in boxes. So if you check this H1, okay, you see the color, the background color applied around it like a box, as if the H1 element is in a box. If you check my H2 also, it shows that it's kind of in the box. I've not specified anything for the H3, so it's taking the old background, and the background for the first paragraph and second paragraph is, and the third paragraph is white, just because I was not specific on which paragraph. I just indicated paragraph, so it will apply to all my my paragraphs. Okay, remember when we were doing selectors, I explained that we have universal selectors, we have type selectors. So this is one example of the type selectors. This is also another example of the type selectors. Assuming I want to use both this color also for my H3, what I'll do is I'll just give a comma here, and I'll indicate H3. So my third paragraph will also be like my first paragraph in color. So let me just check. I've just made some changes. Let me just check. You see, so my third heading, okay, my third heading will also be as though it is the first, because I apply the same rules to the just as the first. So this is the beauty of what? Of CSS. Okay, this is the beauty of CSS. Just one rule, but it can apply to multiple elements. Okay, this paragraph that I mentioned is applying to paragraph 1, 2, 3. If I want to be specific, then I now become what? Specific. Okay, let's continue on the lessons of color and explain color into detail. So we are going to understand what pixels are and how to what? Give. To understand color, you should know that every color on a computer screen is created by the mixing amount of red, green, and blue, which we have explained, and we have actually done some practicals on them. Okay, you can also use a color picker in case you don't know a specific any specific color in mind. You can use the color picker. I use the color. Let me explain what color picker is. So I want to explain the color picker. Assuming I come to this particular red, okay, and I do not know any specific color, I'll just be playing around, okay, my palette, my color palette. When I start playing around my color palette, you see, whilst I'm moving around, you can see that the value of the hex code is changing. Okay, you can see it's changing. I can decide to come, if I want a bit of green, I can come here. Okay, then the more I go to the top right corner, the deeper the green, the more I go off it, the lighter. Okay, so I can just also do this. If I want a bit of pink or an orange, I'll just be mixing them up, and I have this also to play around with. So if I choose a particular color, I have to see the color at the top there, and if I want to settle on it, I use the color picker, choose the color I want. So in this instance, I'm choosing yellow. I can go up and get a deeper yellow. Okay, then it will be the color that I've chosen for now. You see it's showing here. I will have to save the file. You see it's telling me I've not saved it, so let me just save it and show you the changes we've made on our second level header. Okay, let me go into my browser right now and then refresh it. You see, so now it has given it a different background color of yellow, which we use the color picker in what? In choosing. Okay, so that's the color picker. Let's continue with our slide. Okay, so we can choose the color picker as you see it here. Computer monitors are also made up of millions of tiny squares called pixels. Actually, pixel is also an acronym which stands for picture element. PIX, which stands for the picture, and EL, which stands for element. That means any amount of picture you see, or anything you see on a screen or any monitor, has a lot of pixels, some tiny boxes, okay, which represent pixels. So the more you zoom in, okay, the more you see them. Okay, so you have some phones that can take pictures that are 12 megapixel, 24 megapixel, 64 megapixel. So it depends on the amount of pixels. Okay, that's so monitors are able to render pictures or any form of graphic into pixels. When the screen is not turned on, let's say when your screen is off, okay, when your screen is off, it becomes black. Why is it black? Because it's not emitting any light. But the moment you turn it on, each pixel can be in a different color. Just as you see a lot of color, you see black here, you see an orange color, you see background color of black, you see all this white color, these blue colors you see. All of them can be what? Can be categorized into smaller and then tiny square pixels. That creates a very very beautiful picture that we always see. Okay, the color of every pixel on the screen is expressed in terms of what? The RGB, just like we explained. Okay, our television screens also explains how the RGB works. Every color at all can be expressed by the mixture of little amount of what? Of RGB. Okay, color picking tools are also available in image editing programs like Photoshop, like GIMP. In fact, even on MS Paint, okay, you can see color picking tools. You can also use the RGB values specified next to the RGB, okay, or the hex code provided next to the pound or hash. Or you can also go to colorschemedesigner.com. Let me explain using an image editing program, which is Paint, MS Paint. Now this is MS Paint, an image editing software, okay, which we can use to easily explain what I mean by the color picking tools. So let me just go to edit colors. Okay, for instance, I want to use a color, but I'm not too specific. I don't know the amount of red, amount of green, amount of blue a color has, and I don't see it in the palette here. I can just go to either edit colors, just like I explained earlier. You can see the RGB around this area, so you can just be manipulating it. Okay, you can just be manipulating it to see the amount of red or the amount of green or the amount of blue gives you so this is the color we are trying to mix, okay, to pick. So you can just come, if you want a lighter color, we'll go up. Okay, so let's say we come to green and we want a lighter green, so we'll move up the ladder. If we want a deeper green, we come down the ladder. Okay, so as we are missing, you can see that the RGB is also moving. Okay, we also come to what? HSL later. I will use the same tool to explain HSL. Okay, so back to our slide. What is HSL? Which is hue, saturation, and brightness. Okay, hue simply means color. Hue, okay, is just the meaning of color. Okay, technically speaking, a color can also have saturation and brightness as hue. Okay, as its hue. And when we say saturation, it's just the amount of gray in a color. At maximum saturation, there would be no gray in color. That means that the more the saturation, the lesser the gray in a color. And then the minimum saturation, the color will mostly be gray in color. That means if you want more gray in the color, we go down, we reduce the saturation. If we want less gray, we increase the saturation. What about brightness? When we say brightness, it simply refers to how much black is in a color. Brightness comes with how black something is. The maximum brightness, there would be what? No black. If there's a picture and we want to brighten the picture, that means that we are trying to reduce the amount of black in a particular picture. So the higher the brightness, the lower the black, and then the lower or the minimum brightness gives us the higher black in the color. That is the difference between hue, saturation, and brightness, which stands for HSL. We saw HSL in the editing tool I just used. What is contrast? When we say the contrast of a picture of an image, okay, it comes when you are choosing a foreground and background colors. It is important also to ensure that there is enough contrast for text to be legible. I told you when you're choosing a background and a foreground color, you should choose the colors that matches, so that not match in the same as in the same color, but choose colors that will be able to show on it. So the background color should be different from the foreground color, such that the foreground color will be visible. So if you check this my slide, my background color is black and my foreground color is white. It actually brings out the foreground color. It makes it visible for everybody to be able to read. In fact, even the entire body of this particular slide, you can see the background color is orange and my text is white. Okay, my foreground color is white. So this actually explains what contrast is. Make sure you do not mix colors that makes your reading, or people who come to your website be finding it difficult to be able to read whatever you have put in place for them. Okay, text is harder to read when there's low contrast between the background and the foreground color. A lack of contrast is particularly a problem for those with visual impairment, those who have challenges with their sight, okay, and those who are color blinded. It also affects people with poor monitors. They are not able to actually read whatever is on screen properly. Text is easier to read when there's a higher contrast between the background and the foreground, just like I explained here with my slide using the white and then the black. So putting black as a background and a white on the black makes it easier to read. Okay, for a very lengthy amount of text, reducing the contrast a little bit improves readability. Okay, and then you can also reduce contrast by using dark gray text on a white background, something similar to what I have used. Okay, so either dark gray or very black and then white color on top. It makes a very good color. It gives a very good contrast. Another one should be a blue background. Okay, a deep blue background with a white text on it also is a very good combination. You can try your hands on. Okay, let's talk about opacity. What opacity mean? Okay, the transformation of CSS has made it possible to add opacity as part of the RGB. So if you check, you can see opacity or the RGBA. The A there stands for alpha. Okay, it shows an amount of opacity that is attached to the red, green and blue colors. When we say opacity comes from the word opaque. Okay, CSS3 introduces opacity property, which allows you to specify the opacity of an element and any of its chart elements. The value, okay, is a number between 0.0 and 1.0. So 1.0 is the highest, okay, and then 0.0 is the lowest. So you can get 0.1, which means 10% in percentages, 0.5, which is 50%, okay, 0.15 50%, 0.45 45%, 0.60 is 60%. Okay, opacity. Now the RGBA property allows you to specify a color just like you would do in the RGB, but now adds a fourth value to indicate opacity. This is known as the alpha, like I said. So RGBA stands for red, green, blue and alpha, and the alpha represents the opacity between 0.0 and then 1.0. okay, the RGBA value will only affect the element on which it is applied. It doesn't apply to child elements. Some browsers will not recognize RGBA colors. You can offer a fallback. That means in case you are using a browser that does not support RGBA, it should display a solid color instead of displaying it with the opacity. Okay, so there are rules that apply to the same element. You indicate that, okay, If this does not take the RGBA, it should take this color. You can specify it either in a hex code or using a color name or using the RGB. So if the RGBA does not work, it should fall back on the RGB or the color name or the hex code. Okay, I was explaining HSL, which is what? Hue, saturation, and then what? Lightness. So HSL and HSLA. So in this case, the A becomes the alpha, just like we were explaining in the RGBA. Okay, the HSL color property has been introduced also in CSS story as an alternative way to specify colors instead of using the RGBA or RGB or the hex code or the color name. The value of this property starts with the letters HSL followed by individual values inside parentheses, which is inside bracket. Okay, so hue is what? Expressed as an angle between 0 and 360. You know, a circle has an angle of 360 degrees. Half of a circle or a semicircle has 180, just like the way a straight line has 180. Okay, a square has an angle, inside angle, which is the right angle of 90. Okay, saturation is also expressed as percentage. We told you saturation has to do with the amount of gray in a particular color, and lightness or brightness has to do with the amount of what? Black. Okay, so 0% lightness simply means white, 100% lightness simply means black. The HSLA color property allows you to specify color properties using hue, saturation, and lightness, as I've explained above here, and as a fourth value which represents transparency, which is what? Opacity. And alpha is expressed as a number between 0.0 and 1.0. For example, 0.5 represents 50% transparency and 0.75 represents 75%. Okay, so let's go to the editing tool once again to explain HSL and HSLA. So we are going straight onto MS Paint once more. Now this is Paint. Now if you check here, you see the HSL. Okay, HSL, and then the amount of what? Saturation, and then lightness. This is the RGB. You see, so as I go up the ladder, the color becomes lighter. As I come down, it becomes deeper. Now look at the brightness. 0% lightness, and then I go. So as I'm moving up and down, I get different hue colors and different saturation colors, different RGB colors. Okay, different RGB colors. This doesn't have the opacity and or what we call the alpha property, which is the HSLA and the RGBA. Now this brings us to the end of the color as used in CSS, and then we are going to talk more on text. Okay, on text, which is going to be our 12th chapter of this course. Thank you for taking part, and see you in the next lesson.